This design project, the Sonwabe Fishing Commons, is an exploration into coastal infrastructure that acts reparatively by supporting fishing practices and ecologies on the False Bay coastline. My zone of inquiry is Sonwabe Beach, which is a sandy car park, popular fishing beach for local fishers, and public launch site. Sonwabe sits in a politically charged and historically uneven coastal landscape. During apartheid, communities from the Cape Flats were systematically excluded from prime stretches of False Bay's coastline, pushed inland, and denied access to safer, better serviced launch sites. That legacy remains spatially visible, while Muizenberg and Cork Bay hold formalised infrastructures for recreational and commercial fishing. Sonwabe, used predominantly by working-class fishers from Mitchell's Plain, has no slipway, no facilities, and no safety structures despite decades of continuous use. The absence of infrastructure here is not an accident, but a continuation of inequitable coastal governance. Although it appears unassuming, Sonwabe holds enormous significance for local fishers and ecologies. I was initially drawn to Sonwabe after participating in group ecology mapping exercises because of the diverse systems interacting and coexisting with each other. I started investigating the human ecological interactions between the bird life, fisher people, and how prominent winds are constantly shifting the sand dunes, causing baiting pile drive to become dangerous for motorists and displacing seagull habitats. Alongside the natural systems, fishers use the beach daily, negotiating with these ecological processes. The beach is a registered launch site and is significant to the local fishing community from Mitchell's Plain and the Cape Flats for its location to fishers' homes and lack of reefs. To uncover more depth of these dynamics, I created this sectional animation with the goal of identifying moments of alignment, conflict, and interdependence between systems and species at Sonwabe, such as the seagulls scavenging or fishers' baits, scraps, and discarded fish. After visiting the site a few times, I noticed a father teaching his son how to fish. This instantly grabbed my attention because this intergenerational passing down of knowledge of the sea is deeply personal to my own story. These moments of knowledge transfer also shaped my positionality. My dad grew up fishing with my grandfather to put food on the table, and that knowledge of the ocean was passed directly to me. My comfort with the sea is because of this intergenerational learning. Many people who did not grow up in this dialogue or who were excluded due to apartheid often experience the ocean through fear. Knowledge is passed down through embodied gestures, stories, repetition, and shared labor. This heritage exists strongly at Sonwabe through the Sonwabe Fishing and Tourism Front, yet there is no formal infrastructure supporting this vital cultural practice. There is a collaboration of cooperatives called the Sonwabe Fishing and Tourism Front, and over the last few months I have been in conversation with Mrs. Oppelt to better understand the lived experiences of the local fishing community. I explained my academic project to her, and out of the goodness of her heart, she was happy to speak to me about Sonwabe and share videos of how they launch their boats with tractors. She represents the people that rely on Sonwabe for their livelihoods and explained how they have been fighting and begging for more than a decade for their community to enjoy their coastline safely. They hold a 15-year fishing license but receive no infrastructure and no support. And in conversation with me, she said, the department has been denying us our coastline and expressed that they are seen as criminals. She expressed how they want to formalise the launch site and make it safer and want to collaborate with stakeholders to implement structures to manage their coastline together. She said that ideally they need proper access to the beach to launch vessels, infrastructure for community gatherings and meetings, and want a space to sell fish and create opportunities for local fishers. There used to be a tuck shop and ablution block at Sonwabe, but it was demolished in 2020 due to lack of maintenance. Articles online also refer to Sonwabe as lack and plaque and explain the Sonwabe Fishing and Tourism Front's urge for a safe and managed launch site, as local fishers have gone missing in the past when launching in rough conditions. I also spoke to a few fishermen on site, and they expressed that the fishing is good at Sonwabe. That's why they have been coming back there for 30 years, especially for kabeljou, geeljoen in spring or summer, and how there are no infrastructures along the stretch, but if there were, the fishermen would make good use of it. These conversations reinforce the urgency and legitimacy of the community's call for a formalised fishing commons. I then mapped the public launch sites in False Bay. The yellow markers show the only places where small-scale fishers may legally launch a vessel. In purple, I mapped where the communities who fish at Sonwabe live, which is mostly along the Cape Flats. The closest legal alternative is Miller's Point, which is a long and expensive drive. In an online article about the Sonwabe fishing community, a fisherman stated that fuel took a huge chunk of my income to move my boat from Grassy Park to Miller's Point. Another fisherman said, "It is my humble plea to be able to fish close to my home," and others expressed their concerns about safety and said, "If the breadwinner is lost at sea, then what support is there or alternatives for the family?" The public launch sites in False Bay are all slipways with infrastructure, except Sonwabe, which is a sandy beach launch and remains undersupported and undermanaged. Sure, there are better places to launch, but Sonwabe's proximity to fishers' homes means that they don't have to go far to put food on the table. I then started mapping the systems happening on site. Firstly, I mapped my own experiences and knowledge of the fishing processes to try and identify what are the parts in the process that may need infrastructural support and understand fishing practices on the site. Overlaying this section with the movement and activity on site showed the density of informal use, such as cars arriving, children playing, fishers casting, gulls feeding, and dunes shifting. From this, I identified and recorded the user groups and their spatial dynamics to uncover how humans and non-humans are currently using the site and where their activities happen. Each group occupies the site differently, and this revealed significant overlaps between the bird life, trek netters, small-scale fishers, fish vendors, local families, and tourists, which became points of conflict or opportunity. Then I looked at what infrastructure and services each group requires. For example, fishers need a safe launch access, cleaning, cooking, selling, and storage areas. Ecologies are in need of dune restoration and protection of seagull habitats. Tourists or visitors would seek safety and experience, and the Sonwabe Fishing and Tourism Front needs a space for governance and community gatherings. Lastly, overlaying all these layers revealed three main zones that require extra support and call for a potential reparative response. Firstly, the launch site. Secondly, infrastructure for fishers and community activities. And thirdly, dune restorations and seagull habitat protection. My position on repair in the context of Sonwabe is not fixing what is broken, but is the ongoing work of nurturing what already exists. Repair becomes a spatial and historical gap in recognition experienced by fishing communities from the Cape Flats, whose practices, heritage, and knowledge have been overlooked or marginalized. Rather than reshaping their ways of engaging with their coastline, this project rather acknowledges that meaningful activity is already taking place here. The role of design is not to redirect these practices, but to support and strengthen and make safer what already exists. My project is trying to understand repair as an ethic of non-interference and careful facilitation, a commitment to designing with, not over communities and ecologies that shape Sonwabe. In response to these three key areas of intervention, I did a precedent study of how projects have dealt with similar issues or in similar environments to inform my design and material decisions. Firstly, I explored precedents for launch sites and safe launch alternatives. Secondly, I looked at precedents for wind-responsive infrastructures. And lastly, precedents for sand retention and methods for building in a sensitive dune landscape. Through many iterations, trials and errors, and a design reinvention that happened very recently, after continuous learning about what would be appropriate on this complex site, I landed on my design for the Sonwabe Fishing Commons, a management space for the Sonwabe Fishing and Tourism Front, and a launch site and fish market for the anglers of Sonwabe. The main drivers of the design was a response to the nature of the harsh, exposed coastal site. An NSRI watchtower is integrated for boat and water safety during launches and becomes a visual marker for the boats to spot the building from the sea. This tall point can be seen from Baden-Powell to increase safety in response to the site's isolation. The building is partially embedded in the dunes while rising above them, expressing the duality of shelter and landmark. The form supports the narrative of the fishing process, from launch to market. and moving through the building exposes the fishing process as a spatial sequence. Upon entry, you are met with rows of fishermen's lockers and the material life of Sonwabe's fishes. Rain jackets hanging in bright colors, rods, and stacks of tackle and gear. Fish fillet, cleaning, and buck and braai stations allow for visibility of labor and processes. An adjacent cold storage and refuse room and a service passageway allows for on-site freezing of fish and easy disposal of scraps. There is a space for fisher people to display their catch of the day on ice and flexible market space that allows for vendors to set up their tables in a zone that is protected from the wind and distributes the catch. Sunken seating and a viewing deck are then provided to wait for the boat's arrival and for gatherings and discussions of the day before heading home. This turns the architecture into a living production line, making labor visible and celebrating heritage. The NSRI Watchtower and admin spaces support long-term safety and governance in partnership with the Sonwabe Fishing and Tourism Front. Central offices are provided for meetings and proper management of the site and launch. Because this is a beach-based surf launch, the launch system relies on tractors and a 15-ton winch that is a universal option for large boats and smaller fishers, which is integrated into the front tower. A demarcated launch zone and boat ramp improves launch safety and prevents conflict with nesting gulls. The sensitive ecosystems called for an ecological coexistence and a dune-integrated structure that retains the dunes. The roof of the building becomes an extension of the dune, re-establishing Strandveld vegetation that stabilizes the sand and hosts for seagull roosting areas, providing not only shelter for people, but for gulls too. This reinforces the idea of architecture not dominating nature, but coexisting and collaborating with it, facilitating for these interspecies relationships that I uncovered through animation earlier on. The permanent concrete and brick structure is embedded within the dune, grounding the building in the landscape, while the front edge remains far more flexible. Its curved form deflects the dominant southeasterly winds, and a layer of openable and adaptable reclaimed fishing nets wrap around the facade and roof to filter wind, light, and bird movement. There are already initiatives that recycle and shed hundreds of kgs of fishing nets at a time in Cape Town, so the material source is readily available and in need of a new application, and is easy to replace and easy to repair by the community. These renders show the Sonwabe Fishing Commons in action, alive with people, gulls, wind, and water. It is a shared human and non-human landscape. Here you can see what the building would look like in the landscape when driving from Strandfontein to Muizenberg along Baden-Powell Drive. At Sonwabe, people, dunes, and birds have always negotiated this coastline together. The project simply seeks to repair by giving form to these long-standing relationships between humans and ecologies, and between the community and the coastline that has always been theirs. It recognizes and uplifts a coastal heritage that has long been overlooked, creating a place where livelihood, culture, and ecology can flourish safely and visibly into the future. Thank you.